Hi guys, so today I'll be filming a Q&A video. It's where I take some questions from the previous 4 or 5 videos and do my best to answer them. My niece gets the questions together for me. I'm never sure what's coming here, but let's get right to it. The first questions are from last month's Q&A. Emily Allen says, I love your cardigan. Where did you get it? Pretty sure I got that at Target a couple years ago. It is a nice neutral color. I wear it a lot, kind of goes with anything. Rhonda Pippi says, would you mind sharing where you got your heater? She's talking about the heater in my she shed. I'm not sure where I got it. I'm thinking Amazon. I'll try to find a link for you and leave it down below in the description box if I can find it. But it is a really neat little heater. It's that kind that kicks off when the temperature reaches a certain degree. It's held out nicely for me over the years. The next questions are from the thrift store makeovers video. AM Sit says, will you add a food safe oil to the cutting board, and if so, what kind? Normally I just use a beeswax if I apply an oil onto a cutting board. Now if you guys have any tips for that, let me know down below in the comments. I'm sure like a mineral oil, or I don't know, would coconut oil, would that work? I'd be curious to know what you guys use. Janine says, question, I'm curious about the wood beams in your kitchen. Are they structural or just decorative? Also, how do you clean your paint sprayer? The beams are just for decorative purposes. We actually tore the walls out. There used to be walls where the beams are at. Used to be a little pantry behind the wall. And we tore those walls out and then added the beams. I always wanted beams somewhere here in our house. I just love that look, and it was really convenient to put them in there, then to cover up where the walls used to be. And the beams are actually from an old barn that was torn down here in our area. We were lucky enough to get a couple of the beams. And as far as cleaning the paint sprayer, it does take a lot of time to clean. I often say I sometimes spend just as much time cleaning the sprayer as I do in actually painting, but it's so worth it to just keep running water through there until it comes out clear, because you don't want any paint to build up in there or you can't use it anymore. I had been wanting to show you guys how I go about to clean my sprayer in I think it was my crazy paint day video, and I forgot. So one of these times I'll make sure to do that. So Denise says, she's talking about the cabinet that I had redone. Did you put a protective coat on the top? If so, was it wax or polycrylic? I actually didn't for that cabinet. Oftentimes I do. I'm not sure why. I just felt sometimes I'll apply the wax or the polycrylic if I feel like the surface is extra smooth and maybe the paint will chip off. But with oak, you're often okay to just, for some reason, oak kind of seems to hold paint better, I think. But there definitely would be nothing wrong to apply, a clear wax or a polycrylic over the top, even just to kind of protect it so it doesn't, chip off. But for that cabinet, I didn't. Janet Davis says, a question for you. Do you clear coat the glass and ceramic items you paint? Just curious. I don't. I feel with the paint I use for, glass items, I buy the paint, the spray paint in cans, which is oil-based. I almost feel like it already has almost like a clear coat in there. It's usually on there to stay if you spray it onto a surface. Now I'm sure it wouldn't hurt to add a clear coat, just for an added protection. But to be honest, often I'm a little leery, I guess you could say, with some of the oil-based, clear coats in the cans. I'd be kind of worried that they might turn yellow, depending on what surface you spray them onto. But I have used them already, but I've also had some bad experiences with that, with yellowing, so I probably wouldn't apply it just for that reason. Penny says, are the berry boxes paper? I wouldn't call it paper exactly. I'd say more like a kind of like a heavy cardboard maybe. Sarah says, why crud cutter instead of sanding? Often if I use crud cutter, I'm just trying to kind of clean up a surface and then maybe just dull it up a little bit. If I have a surface that I want to paint that is really extra glossy and smooth, then I'll probably use my sander. But again, the crud cutter just for surfaces that aren't really, it's not necessary maybe to actually sand, but I still want to, again, clean them up or just, dull the surface up a bit. Crud cutter works amazing. So the next questions here are from the Crazy Paint Day video. Chrissy is asking, She says, "Hi Mary, could you tell me if you prefer the DeWalt over the Wagner that you tried a while back? I realize there are differences, but I had a Wagner before and I'm wondering if I should get a compressor type next." She's talking about the paint sprayer. I have a couple different ones that I've used in my videos. I often use my air sprayer. That's usually my go-to sprayer, but I also have a Wagner that I've used. I would say it's basically just a personal preference. For me, I'm just so used to my air sprayer. It's often what I go to. The Wagner, works quite well too, but I guess I'm probably a wimp or something, but my arm gets really tired if I use that one. It's just so much heavier and kind of harder to maneuver. And I do have an awesome air system, like you say here in your comment. It's just so easy for me to just go to the air sprayer. Again, just what I'm used to. And I don't know, is it just me, but I always feel like the air sprayer kind of does more of a misty spray versus the Wagner one, maybe creating just a smoother finish. I don't know, is that just because I'm so used to it again? Maybe I could, fiddle with the settings on the Wagner and get it to spray even better than it does. But I have used it already and I like it for some projects, but I'll probably just always go, if I have a choice, I'll probably go for the air sprayer. But if you like your Wagner, I would probably just advise to keep using it. That way you don't have to mess with an air system. So the next question here is, my question is, how do you get your paint to stick and not peel or chip? Because I see you don't always sand your items down. I've tried painting once my items are cleaned and deglazed, but it doesn't work for me. I'm not sure. I wonder what kind of paint you use. I always have my go-to paint. I talk about it all the time, but I love Do It Best brand paint. It's like a paint and primer in one. I just feel like it really does a good job of sticking to surfaces. Now I've also used other paints that work quite well too, like the Valspar, and I've used different chalk paints. Those of course stick really well to a surface. But I'd say it could be that. But if you do use that paint and it still does that, I don't know, maybe you've just had some bad luck with some of the furniture being too glossy and smooth. Maybe it does need to be sanded down a bit, because I do that. If I have a piece that is extra smooth and glossy, I will sand it down just to get it a little more dull and rough. And I also feel it's so important to, if you have a surface that seems like it doesn't quite hold the paint like it should, is just to cover your paint with a polycrylic or a wax. That does an amazing job of protecting your paint. So the next question here is Deb asking, if there are several layers of paint on something and you want to try to get to the base wood, do you ever use a chemical stripper instead of just sanding? Yes, I have done that already in the past. It's probably one of my least favorite jobs, though. I just basically hate it. I'm sure if you've used some before, you know what I'm talking about, but it just takes a lot of time and it's so smelly and yuck. But it is worth it if it's probably your only way to actually get down to the base wood of something. So for me, I usually, try to avoid it, but it's definitely doable if you have a lot of, time and patience on hand. So the next question here is Kathy asking, why do you paint with the drawers in the piece? I'm trying to think. I know I do that sometimes. I'm not even sure what kind of piece I had done that to here in the video. Right now I can't think, but I'd say I probably left the drawer in there so I don't end up getting paint on the sides of the drawer. I know sometimes I'll do that. I'll just leave it in the piece to paint the drawer front, and then I'll remove it to paint my trim, out around the drawer on the actual, piece of furniture, if that makes sense. So I'm not quite sure. I know I've done either way. Sometimes if I get really particular, I'll, remove the drawers and then maybe shrink wrap them or wrap something out around the drawer so I don't get all that overspray on the sides. So the next question here is, do all paint sprayers need an air compressor to run? I was curious about that. And are all those pieces you did for sale? No, there are actually paint sprayers that use electric instead of air. And I guess I had touched on that here a couple questions back. And then as for the pieces that I painted, yeah, most of those I will sell. So the next question here is Suzanne Perkins saying, how do you get all of the overspray off of your hair? I don't think I get any paint in my hair. I don't know, does it look that way in the videos? But I usually kind of try to turn myself or angle myself that, the wind will actually carry the overspray away from me. Now I have done projects already where I've painted overhead that I ended up getting some in my hair, but I probably should have covered them up. And then she also asked what brand of shoes that I'm wearing while painting. Oh, I have to try to remember what kind of shoes I was wearing that day. I'm thinking maybe those peach and gray ones. Those are Adidas from a couple years ago. Joanne Finn says, do you use anything special on your hands to keep them from drying? I find that mine get very dry when sanding and cleaning things and washing my hands so often. Yeah, I do experience that, especially in the winter time. I don't really do anything special with them. I probably should. I know I don't really take care of my hands like I should, but now and then I'll just apply a regular lotion to them. Darlene Jones also has a question here about overspray. Do you ever have any issues with overspray when using your paint sprayer? I see you painting next to buildings, cars, etc. And I'm always curious if that is a concern or not. I notice once paint is in an overspray form, it's actually more like a dust. It'll just settle down onto a surface and just kind of create a dust that can easily be wiped off then. And as far as our cars, I've never, we try to, people don't park close to me when I'm painting. So far I haven't painted my husband's red truck white or anything like that. And as far as the building where I'm painting next to, it's such an ugly old building anyway. I guess I just don't really care. Maybe I should, but again, so far I haven't noticed anything that can't just be wiped off then. The next questions here are from the Mantle video. Why can't you switch mantles out and put this one in your living room? The white would be a cute decor item for a master or dining room. Love them both. Thank you. I agree. I fell in love with that mantle too, and I realized it would look great in our living room, but there's only one thing. When I installed the shiplap out around our present mantle in the living room, everything is just cut to fit out around that mantle. So it would be kind of hard for me to, I could, I guess, just take it off and make one exactly like that. But as far as using the one I made in the video, that one turned out some shorter and not as wide. It's just a different size, so that really wouldn't have worked. I would have had to change my shiplap too. So the next question here is, since you decided not to open the shop, what are you doing with all the beautiful furniture and items? I finally have an outlet for them, guys. I'm so excited about it. I feel bad, but I can't really talk about it yet. I have learned already if I sometimes talk prematurely about different things on here, then suddenly they're not happening like I thought they would. So I will just plan on, making a video soon on this if everything pans out. So just stay tuned for that. I'm really excited. The next question here is Christy saying, I have a question. I also work with wood. My question to you is, when I stained wood and paint white letters, after I seal it with clear, my letters start to get a cream color. How can I make it stay white? What am I doing wrong? I'm sorry to hear that. That's really frustrating if you work hard on something and then things start to change color. I can't say that that's really ever happened to me. I wonder what kind of sealer that you seal it with, because I've really noticed that certain sealers just tend to yellow. I always recommend Polycrylic by Minwax. It's a water-based, clear coat. And then also the stain, I wonder what kind of stain you use. I also use Minwax products. Not saying that's the only way to go, but I guess being that this never really happened for me, I can kind of guarantee that it shouldn't happen if you use those products. And then also your white paint, again, I use Do It Best brand paint for most of anything I paint. So I'd probably check into maybe just using other products and see how that works. It's weird, but sometimes I think like certain wood can sometimes have an effect on certain colors, if that makes sense. I've only ever had a few issues with Polycrylic, my go-to, Polycrylic by Minwax, turning yellow. And the one time that it did that was on a new piece of furniture that someone had gotten me to, redo for them. Well, I shouldn't say redo, but paint for them. And then I put the Polycrylic over the top of the paint, and it ended up turning yellow. I know they had used ash wood. I kind of blamed it maybe on the wood because it just never happened before, but that can be really depressing if something like that happens. But I know for that I just ended up refinishing everything, and I didn't do the polycrylic. I just avoided that step because I just felt that it could just happen again. The next question here is Carol Green asking, what did I use to attach the mantle to the wall? And dumb me, I forgot to show that in the video. I was going to do it, but I just for the photo shoot, I just used a screw and just kind of diagonally on the shelf part, like the mantle part, I drilled a hole first, again just in the back end, kind of diagonal, then into the wall, and I just fastened a screw just enough to hold it in place. Now if I were to actually install that mantle in my home, I would probably use that same method because I didn't want any screw holes in the front. I kind of liked the front the way it was. I'd probably just use the same method, just drill some diagonal holes in the back part of the mantle. That way if you have decorations on there, you won't even see them. Just put 4 or 5 screws in there. And then of course, if you don't mind having screw holes in the front, your best bet would probably be, how I fastened our mantle in our living room. I just put actual screws in the sideboards, into the wall, like through the mantle into the wall. And I was able to kind of paint over them then, since I painted the mantle. But again, for a stained mantle like this, I think it would almost ruin the look to have, screws in the front there. So the last questions here are from the Trash to Treasure video. The first question is, Mary, I know you've told us numerous times what kind of sander you use, but I forgot. Would you please be so kind to tell me again? Sure, I have a little, not sure of the brand, but it's just a little mouse sander that I get from Amazon. I'll link it down below in case you're looking for one, but you can also get them at Walmart or your local hardware, I'm sure would carry them. But they're just so easy little sanders. I like the pointy part on them. That way you can get into tight little corners. And they're not really expensive, so I sand a lot, so I go through, every couple of years I need to replace mine, but I often just go back to that little mouse sander. The next question here is Lost Librarian saying, you make everything look so effortless and perfect, but how do you get pilot holes and screws to go in straight? I bought a wonderful driller and driver, but in this case, the right tool doesn't guarantee the desired end result. Is there a handy little Mary trick for this? Trust me, my screws don't always go straight either. I don't know, maybe it looks that way in the videos, but they don't. I actually have a little level on my drill. I know some drills kind of have a little level on them that you can see if you're holding everything straight. But often I don't really use the level. I'll just kind of eye it and make sure it looks straight. And again, they're not always straight, but it still kind of seems to work. Suzanne says, I noticed your cut between your thumb and forefinger when you were doing the staple pulling with those needle nose pliers. I was saying to you through the video, please be careful of those pliers. Actually, that was a blister from raking leaves. I was helping my husband's parents clean up their yard, and I'm just not used to raking. It's probably not one of my favorite things to do because I always end up getting a blister, but that's what that was. So the next question here is Dawn asking, would the polyurethane that you used on the hamper be good for a tabletop? It was actually polycrylic that I used by Minwax, one of my favorite products, and absolutely it would be good for a tabletop. In fact, that's what this tabletop has on it. Marypanzer says, do you by any chance know the type of wood you use for the succulent board? I love the color, and it ended up with just the wax finish. One of my favorite colors too. I just love that natural wood. I don't know what kind of wood it is, but I do know that it came out of an old barn. It was like a whitewashed wood, and you probably saw in the video I sanded all the whitewash off, and that is the color that it ended up being. Just beautiful. Annette says, did you use a black paint pen to distress the clock? Yes, I use a Sharpie marker, like a paint marker, to do my distressing for the most part. Marcella says, you have to tell me, where did you get the cute hammer with the staple remover attached? Actually, that was just a screwdriver in there, but that hammer is really cute, and I'll try to find a link for it. It's really handy because you have the hammer, and then you unscrew the handle part, and you have different sizes of screwdrivers in there. So it's pretty neat. It's just a cute little household tool to have on hand. So that pretty much concludes today's questions. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. I appreciate it. I always feel like my Q&As are kind of boring, but I guess it's one way where I can, answer some questions that you guys leave. So as always, I hope you're having an awesome day, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye.